Today on She Said That Out Loud, she has inspired women of color to overcome obstacles and roadblocks to live their best life. Jacente is a therapist and a podcast host in Las Vegas. She owns Wamala Wellness Center, and I'm happy to welcome Jacente.
As a licensed marriage and family therapist, and my practice primarily, I work with mostly women of color. The majority are Black women. The mass majority are Black women. There's a lot that comes into play as far as stigma, stereotypes. All the things that we kind of see played on like in media and stuff like that, as far as the strong Black woman, stereotype, the angry Black woman stereotype, the fill in the blank. There are so many different things that become mental oppression for us, because then it's this game that people try to play, as far as, okay, well, I'm not allowed to be angry because there's reasons why I'm not allowed to be angry. I'm going to be seen as, if it's in the workplace, if it's at the grocery store, if you have a legitimate complaint. So then you have to be passive, we'll say, or you have to be calm or kind, or, try to sugarcoat things for people, when that's not something that other people have to do, that don't have to deal with being a person of color, specifically a Black person. And so it gets really dicey. And with everything going on right now, which, I'm with you on it being kind of unprecedented, in that nothing that's happening now hasn't happened before. But there's something different about, everyone's experience of it. And, in trying to figure out, is it because of social media? Like, we're all much more connected globally. Is it, is it being tired? Being at the point where collectively we are at our wits end, you know what I mean, like at the end of our own ropes. So it's something that we can't continue to just allow to happen without this outburst of what we're experiencing being expressed. All of this is expression. And so you mentioned anger, and in the mental health fields, there's one Instagram called Decolonizing Therapy. And unfortunately, there's been systemically some oppression as far as diagnosing rage and diagnosing, Black people for experiences that other people have, and then medicating something that is legitimate and doesn't necessarily need to be medicated, if that makes sense. Not to say that there aren't people that need medication, but it's the invalidation of a whole people's existence that leads to some of these mental health concerns in the first place. And then we're putting a label or a diagnosis on it, or not necessarily we, but the system is putting a label and saying, oh, well, you have oppositional defiant disorder, you have conduct disorder, and things like that. And then that in and of itself becomes problematic. And so there's so many levels to it. It's really difficult. The more I think about it, it's like being forced to cope with being in an abusive relationship.
Wow, that's deep.
And
That
that's,
I
I mean,
mean,
that's
I never looked at it that way, but I can see that parallel. I mean, I can see it clearly now that you brought that into perspective. And why do you think Black people, or specifically Black women, um, why do you think people view us as aggressive just because we voice our opinion about a specific topic or situation?
I think that culturally we have different backgrounds. So if anyone were to visit a country in Africa, there's diversity within cultures within the whole continent of Africa. But women in general from the African continent are while we're very poised and very graceful and put together, we're also very like, like strong in what we believe and what we think. We're sometimes very straightforward. And so I think because of the cultural differences, I assume, because I don't come from a, Anglo-Saxon background or Caucasian background, I think that that presentation from women is not something that anyone outside of our culture understands. So for them, they see it as aggression, anger, or whatever the case may be. And within our cultures, I'll say cultures because we have diversity as Black people and as African American people or African people, it's seen differently. You know what I mean? I hear clients talk about it. I hear it on, media and things like that. People are like, my mom speaks to me this way or treats me this way because it's from love. And for them, they feel like they understand where that comes from and the context. And I think that it's just the differences in culture that people think that it's something that we're angry about, but then there's also anger and we're allowed to be angry. So, we don't say the same thing to anyone else who makes a complaint about something with passion, and we're calling passion anger, or we're calling anger bad. And that's not necessarily the case.
Oh my goodness, that is so true, because I know when I speak and I'm passionate about something, it may come across as yelling or someone, oh, what are you doing? I'm just passionate about what I'm saying. So I can definitely see that. So basically, it sounds like they need to get to know us. They need to get to know our culture, understand who we are, understand what we mean when we say Black Lives Matter. Because what we're not saying, you know how they try to say, oh, all lives matter. No, we're saying Black Lives Matter too. So that means you need to get to know it. You don't understand us if you don't understand that.
Yeah, I think that the lack of openness to seek understanding, openness to seek information, or it's really empathy at the end of the day, which is even more upsetting. You know what I mean? When I think about it, it's empathy. You can't empathize. Like, do you not have it's a skill. You can build it, you can grow it. You put yourself in someone else's shoes, and it's really not that difficult in theory. But obviously in practice, there has been centuries and centuries of, a lack of seeking to understand and put yourself in someone else's shoes, and just seeing human beings as human beings. You know what I mean? Human beings are allowed to not like each other. There's Black people that don't like each other. We ain't got to all like each other. You know what I mean? But to be able to have a base level of understanding that we are on a very basic level bleed the same blood, like, you know what I mean? Have all of the same functions and experiences and emotions as anyone else. And so on a very basic level, I think that's why it's so enraging, because for those who understand, it doesn't make any sense why someone wouldn't understand.
Right, exactly. And you had mentioned about seeking to understand. So what would someone need to do in order to seek to understand us, to seek to understand Black people?
Yeah, I think that's where the difficulty lies, because as you were saying that, what came to me was humility and an ability or a decision to entertain the idea that you're wrong, or that something that you think is wrong, or something that you've said, or the way that you've believed, you know what I mean? Your perspective could be wrong. And for some people, that's their whole identity, or it's so close to who they think and believe that they are, that the idea of rejecting that or that being wrong means that there's something wrong with me. So that's where the ego comes into play. That's where pride comes into play. And so I think without the ability to be humble enough to say, let me slow down. We got 2 ears, one mouth, so we should be listening more than we are speaking, to entertain the idea that I could be wrong, that I could have grown up with ideas that were incorrect, or I could have been perpetuating, ideologies that were oppressing people. And so I think that's really difficult for people to face. It really requires humility, and being able to entertain that idea that you're wrong. And I think that's something everyone should be able to do. Not just someone seeking to understand oppression, but we should all be able to entertain the idea that maybe the way that I think about certain things, there's another way.
Well, you mentioned something that I like. You said, understanding that you're wrong. a lot of people have an issue with understanding that they're wrong. And I don't know if it has anything to do with how they were raised. Well, matter of fact, I think it does have to do with because there's an issue with accepting that you're wrong, and that's a journey. If you're learning that, that's like self-development. There's a lot of uh, putting yourself in check and paying attention and being aware when these things come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you never grew up with anyone cultivating a need to have a process of self-checking, or no one else was checking you, then of course, as an adult, it's really difficult to entertain the idea that I'm wrong. Like what? Like I've never been wrong before. There's
That's
people
an
that have
argument.
in their minds, in their lives, have not been told that they were wrong, or does that go with entitlement and things like that? And I think that I think that is something that's also maybe cultural, because I really almost feel like culturally, we get told we're wrong a lot, and we understand it, and we can pick up the pieces and move forward. We know how to rebuild. We know how to use that as a building block.
Mhm.
I'm was born in Africa but raised in the States, so I'm a little bit of a first generation, third culture kid. But like that level of growing up with correction and doing things a different way, or doing things the quote unquote right way, whatever that was within my family, was something that was an active process to now as an adult, I can do that on my own. And I think that culturally as Black people, we have that in place a little bit because of oppression. So we're always self-checking, and we're checking. And that's why we have conversations with our kids about how to act in public. That's why we have conversations, with our family members around certain things and how to present and why we want to appear a certain way. That's us learning how to self-check. Now, should we have to do that? No. Does it potentially have some level of benefit to us in certain situations? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like if you go to a job and you've never done a self check, or you've never been able to reevaluate yourself, how are you supposed to get through your annual review and not like break down and die, like
Right.
cry and stuff? So I think that entitlement, we see the way that children, now I'm not saying that Black people raise their children perfectly and people that aren't Black don't, but I will say that we see the stereotypical like memes and things on TV shows where this is how a Black family raises their kids and this is how a white family raises their kids. And so I think those differences in how we raise children also come into play.
And so it sounds like it's a combination of how we were raised, what we're taught by society because we're watching it on TV, and you already know that that's programming in itself, programming us on how we think things are supposed to be or whatnot. Usually, when you talk about correction, usually when you're corrected when you're wrong, someone is getting in trouble. So I think people have a fear of if they admit that they were wrong,
Yeah.
something's gonna happen and it's not gonna be good. So it's almost like they don't want to face, people don't want to face what we're dealing with. Some people don't want to face the fact that there is an issue right now that we're dealing with. And I think that has to do with feeling like they'll get in trouble some kind of way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that that's something that's huge because, if I don't even want to say if, I guess in the mind of someone who doesn't see all of this to be true, if there are truly systemic issues and I have contributed to that, and what society is saying is in order to correct that or to change that, a lot of things have to change, which change my world, then that's something, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean trouble necessarily as getting arrested or anything like that. Trouble could be your world looking different, your world being upside down, from what you knew it to be prior to. And so I think that when someone, I don't even think people even get that far in their minds consciously.
No, I don't.
I think subconsciously it creates this chain reaction that's like, oh my gosh, no, that's just too overwhelming, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for Black people all the time, right? But it's uncomfortable for those who have never had the realization of the reality of things. And that discomfort sometimes just keeps them where comfort is, which is obviously, you know what I mean? That of an oppressed system with these narratives that just don't work. And so I think that people kind of seeking to stay comfortable keeps them in these frames of mind with these perspectives that are problematic.
It seems like we're in a paradigm shift. I mean, because anytime you're in a shifting mode and you're moving from one thing to another, it's not going to be comfortable. I don't care what it is. If you birthing a baby, you already know that's uncomfortable. Anything major is uncomfortable. Um, and I think that's what we're going through right now. It is uncomfortable for me too. I'm not comfortable with everything because it's almost like we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yep.
We have people out there protesting. How long have they been protesting?
I think it's been like 2 or 3 weeks, something like
I know
that.
this is the longest since I've been alive that I've seen this type of display. I believe something good is going to happen though out of this. I mean, it may seem bad, on the surface, but something good is going to happen because of this. I think we will see some change, and it will be a new world, like you said. And it's uncomfortable just adjusting to the fact that I think we'll be taken over in
You
some
know,
areas.
oh, for sure. And I think that the more that people can do their own work and do the collective work, the stronger the movement is.
Oh, yes.
Because we have to be able to go within to do our own work. We already have been dealing with generational trauma and, you know what I mean, and so many different things on so many different levels.
No.
So to ignore ourselves within all of this would be a disservice and would not allow for this to be sustainable, because in order for things to actually change or actually shift, as opposed to it being something that, people protest for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever, and then things just kind of go back to whatever normal is. And in order for it to be a sustainable shift, we have to go within. We have to face ourselves. We have to have conversations with our families. We have to entertain the idea again of, are we doing everything, in a way that is helping us to be sustainable moving forward? Because that's what it's going to take, is sustainability for the next year, for the next 6 years, 16 years, 60 years. And that's something that I personally think that it requires the diversity of both. There has to be kind of a balance within it.
Now, going within is deep. When you got to search within, you might encounter some anxiety. I'm speaking from experience. I mean, that's deep when you have to realize different things that you need to change, and face the fact, or look at that man in the mirror and take accountability for where you need to change.
Yeah.
And I think, we have the collective community doing that. That's powerful. Some people are not going to want to change. Some people will not change. I get that. But they're going to be forced to. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I think that, you're going to have to get on or get left behind, really, at the end of the day. If there's people that don't, want to come to the new understanding of things, we've seen it with like technology and stuff like that, right? So as technology has so rapidly evolved, there are people that don't want to embrace technology. There's businesses that don't want to embrace technology and things like that. And okay, you can keep doing what you're doing, but you may get left behind in the throes of that progression. And so that's to be expected. I think that the oppression without typically turns into the oppression within. And so that's why I say we have to go within, because how many people are dealing with internalized racism and internalized oppression, and still dealing with the effects of that generational trauma that we talk about, and how the Black family has been broken down and broken apart, and all of these things that when we're out in the world, nobody can really see on the outside. For some people, for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But there's turmoil going on the inside for so many, and each person is responsible for that turmoil, and to resolve it, to work through it, to find support for it. And so I think that that's why it's so necessary. But it's interesting to see all of the resources and the support that's out there for people in order to be able to do that dual work.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to my sister, she's a nurse practitioner, and she was telling me how she's seen so many patients lately where they're coming in for anxiety and depression, all stemming from this. Do you think it's okay to have a level of anxiety that's actually normal? And then when does it cross over to where you need to get some help or support?
Yeah, so the way that I see anxiety is that, when we think of something bad happening in the future, we get nervous or worried. But when we get stuck in that place, it leads to anxiety. And anxiety at its, I don't know if I want to say worse, but anxiety when it's full blown can lead to paralysis, because you're overwhelmed, you're scatterbrained, you don't know, where to begin. You've got to go to work, but you can't even focus while you're at work. You might be having physical or physiological symptoms. And I think that when it becomes something that creates dysfunction in your life, whether it's in your relationships or your work, then it's time to start entertaining the idea of seeking outside support. There are so many, free resources out there. I'm an advocate for saying exhaust everything that you possibly can, but we know how to typically be healthy. We still have gyms and personal trainers though. So it's like knowing that you may need support at some time, and that's okay. But there's oppression around that, because the ratio of people of color to serve people of color is off. And there's reasons why people don't want to seek support, mentally and emotionally, because of systemic, oppression. And so it's really this cycle again. And then, I've had a lot of clients who have been experiencing the full range of emotions. And I say, for you to be more frustrated, enraged, confused, sad, depressed, anxious, everything all at once would make complete sense at this point, because we're having an experience that literally is unprecedented. At the same time, it's really difficult to say, okay, how do we put a Band-Aid on this, or how do we help you manage this? Because I always shift back to, all right, you're in an abusive relationship, your boyfriend beats you up every day, so let's help you cope with your boyfriend beating you up every day. So it's really difficult finding a balance between that, because some of it maybe is necessary. We, just like everyone needs to be uncomfortable for us to be able to do whatever it is that we need to do in this situation. So it's a response, it's feedback, because there's something wrong. And there actually is something very wrong. So, it's really a delicate balance. Obviously, if someone is experiencing such serious symptoms that they're not able to function, do day-to-day tasks and things like that, seeking support, that could look so many different ways: family, friends, books, YouTube, podcasts, a psychiatrist, a psychiatric nurse. There's so many options for an herbologist, see a Reiki specialist, go get some acupuncture, like whatever you feel like, go to church, whatever the case is, that you feel like is going to help support you, do that thing. But know that there might still continue to be a level of anxiousness there, because there is legitimately things going on to be anxious about. We're dealing with so much uncertainty.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you have so much good information. So let's talk about how mental health seems to be taboo in our community specifically. I don't know what it is when it comes to mental health, but it seems like our people want to exclude the mind. The mind, to me, the mind, what is it? The house divided cannot stand. If your mind isn't right,
Mm.
nothing else is going to be able to function.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people, they're quick to run to the doctor because their leg hurt or their stomach hurt. But when it comes to the mind, for some reason, they don't want to go to a mental health provider. And I don't know if it's something that our culture has been taught about going to see a therapist. But can you speak to that?
I think that there's so many layers. So I think along with being taught, right, to fear certain things or to not partake or do certain things, that comes from a system of oppression, because what happens when you start to get your mind in order and you start to see things clearly? You're going to see the world differently. You're going to be freed up psychologically, energetically, and otherwise to be able to elevate yourself, your family, your community. And of course, that's what the system of oppression does not want. So that's why Black people were not allowed to read. We were not allowed to indulge and continue to practice our cultural customs, because they knew if we stayed intact and everything stayed, if we had access to everything we need to have access to, then we couldn't continue to be oppressed. And so
Eat them anymore.
so everything is all, it's a setup. It's all a setup. Everything is a setup. And we have to be able to, again, humble ourselves to figure out, well, maybe the way that I've been trying to do things isn't working. And that's why I say there's so many different forms of therapy, right? There's so many different ways to get your mind right. But a lot of the times, because people are so caught up with life being really fast paced and things you're just trying to get through the day, just trying to get through the week and things like that, that we can't slow down enough. And so I think it's really interesting that we were, on stay-at-home orders, and then all this stuff kind of happened, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, okay, well, if people were able to slow down enough for a period of time to sit with themselves, because they had no choice, to sit with their families, to do whatever it was they were doing, all over the spectrum of being productive to not doing anything at all, to energize, and people coming out the gate on a whole new level. I don't know. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it, but I think that the reason why we don't want to sit with ourselves is to face some really ugly things, some really scary things that we may not have created, but might be able to influence or take a little bit of control over within what we can, to do something differently about.
You mentioned seeing things clearly once we get our mind right. What do you think would happen if we were all able to see clearly?
Man, I think that it's not something that would be an overnight difference, maybe potentially, but if we could all just see things clearly and understood what we were capable of and what we're here to do, right? Because how many people are sitting on business ideas, and dreams and books that haven't been written, and you know what I mean, love that hasn't been given out for whatever reason. I think that, yeah, we would take over. Like you said, it would be a wrap. Like, I don't know how it would get to that place, but it would definitely be a full-on takeover.
Well, and I think another thing people would have to do is work on pushing past their fears, because there's fear when it comes to starting your own business or writing that book. So it's like you have to tackle your own demons yourself. Like you battling yourself to get that book done or to get that business up and going. So I think that break was well needed. And I agree with you that I think during this time off, everyone's sitting, we all had time to think, and it ignited something. It ignited a light, a fire that is burning, and it's not going to go out until something happens. They're not going to let up. We're not going to let up until something happens. That's for sure.
No, it's going to be interesting to see how things, continue to evolve, which in some ways is, I don't know. clients have been reporting so much fear and anxiety and stress, but on the other side of it, I think that there's also deeper levels of gratitude, and joy and excitement about, all right, like, like, is there something that can be done? Am I doing my part? If I feel like I'm like doing what I'm supposed to, and contributing to the community, shifting, there's also some level of excitement within that, and that's looking forward to something good happening, right? So anxiety is looking forward to something bad occurring in the future, and excitement is looking forward to something good. And you said you're hopeful, right? That this is not the greatest way for things to change. It would be nice if we could just have a conversation. Um, but if that's not the way that it's happening, and things are playing out the way that they are now, then, you're hopeful. Then maybe you were a year ago, 5 years ago, last election, whatever the case may be about where things will end up. And so I think that a lot of people feel very alive right now, which is also very scary, because the fear is legitimate, but fear makes you feel alive too. So it's a really interesting time. It's a lot to deal and cope with. I think as far as identity goes, we're getting even further rooted within our identities, which is, to me, very beautiful to be able to see people so proud of being who they are, being themselves as a singular human on the planet, and then connected to a collective community. And so I think that that's really beautiful, because I think that the divisiveness is also a tool of oppression to keep people from banding together.
Mm-hmm.
So we pin this person against this person, and guess what? They can't make a plan to do anything against us because they're fighting each other. So there's people banding together right now that maybe have never been able to do so before.
Yeah. And what would you say to those people in those businesses that are not addressing this issue? They're not speaking to what's going on today.
Yeah, again, I was having the conversation with my partner because, we turned on Netflix, and then, they're doing their little advertisements, and there's like a Black Lives Matter collection. And he's like, okay, here we go. Like, everyone's jumping on it. Like, oh. And so, we've had the conversation, and I was like, well, it could be that was created to make it easy for people to seek this information, create a playlist. That's the way the company is doing up their part, right? If they have access to this information, how can they make it easy for users? If, let's say, they have nefarious motives and they're just doing it for ratings and for people to watch and for people to perceive that they care or are supporting a movement, I'm like, either way, they're making it easier for users to have access to this stuff. And so I'm like, does it matter at that point what the intention is? It depends on who you talk to. You know what I mean? I think that, again, if we all had that clarity, if we could all get clear on what we needed to do, then the brands that are not supportive, that we can realize are working against us, because if they're against, the Black Lives Matter movement, that means they're against us as individual human beings. Then we wouldn't support those brands. And to me, I'm extra crazy, so no one needs to talk to me about this. I'm like, okay, what we really should do is have a mass exodus. Not forever, but what if everybody left for like a year? Ghana's doors are open, you know what I mean? What if we all left, went to another place that is supportive and cares about us and all that fun stuff for a year? What would happen to America without us here?
There'll be a lot, no money. The money would be, no money would be funneling in the system. I mean, it'll be.
Right. I don't want to spend, we'll go. If we did a boycott, a physical exodus as a boycott and left, then they would really see the effects and how much they need. They already know because they're the ones that are marketing to us. Mm-hmm. So we are the ones that have to elevate our minds to not be fooled by the marketing that's geared for us to spend our money with people that are against us.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just wild. So to me, I'm like, are people really ready, willing? And if they said, if it was Instagram that is the highest funder of someone who is against us, is everyone ready, willing, and able to delete Instagram, to delete Facebook, to get rid of an Apple iPhone if need be? Is everyone ready, willing, and able to get a flip phone? Like, so that's why it's really difficult, because there might be some serious things that have to take place in order for us to really, depending on where you're coming from on it, help to create some of these shifts. And so I think if we all had clarity, we'd all have our own gardens, because we wouldn't be going to Walmart or Albertsons or whatever. We would all be sewing our own clothes, because we wouldn't be shopping at the malls that are not owned by us. And so it would really, I think it would get that's maybe the extreme crazy side of
That's
things.
it. Yeah, that's extreme. That's extreme because, as you know, we don't own anything. I look down at the carpet and I'm like, the carpet that isn't owned by us, my purse, the cups, the light bulbs, everything. We don't own anything. So yeah, that would be to the extreme if
Now,
everything got taken.
the steps within that, right, are like the little things that you can do to make your own difference, to be conscious, to be a conscious consumer, not only of information, but also of the goods and things, choosing brands that you feel um, more aligned with your values and things like that. It may be an inconvenience, but what I was saying on my Instagram is like, listen, like I need replacements. That's why I need y'all to act on these business ideas, because I can't do it all. Okay,
No.
I need to order from Amazon. I'm ready to spend this money, but there's no replacement as far as a Black Amazon, Blamazon, whatever, that can help me to fulfill my order. So people, unfortunately, I think it's going to be difficult a little bit, because we're going to fall prey, or we're going to fall back into, well, I need fill in the blank. So I have to
Hmm.
engage with the system that's oppressive. And so it's a lot to think about.
It's a lot. It's deep. Let the audience know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, and that is Jacent's Gems, JACENTSGEMS. That's also the name of my podcast, where I talk about relationships. We talk about money and, getting out of debt so that you can create generational wealth, to avoid some of the systemic oppression. And I do weekly interviews with different gems in the community about different topics in their fields. And so that's the two most active places that you can find me. And I'm really, love talking and chatting with everyone who sends me a DM or comments. So visit me there.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for all you do in the community, giving therapy to Black women. What if someone wanted to reach out to you for therapy?
So I'm licensed in the state of Nevada, so that's where I can see clients. My website is Wamala Wellness. That's WAMALA wellness.com, and that has all the information and contact information as far as how to reach me for an appointment.
Okay, well, that's beautiful. It's wonderful talking to you, educated sister. And please reach out to her if you have any questions. I'm sure she will be happy to render her services.
Thank you for listening.